hour, and we're already 4 minutes into it, so I suppose we should start.
Yes, welcome to Venus and Furs. We call them fuzzy animals, or funny animals, or what you will. We have some of the biggest and best names in drawing and writing here. Jim Groat and Fred Shetland. Mike Kazalla, Merlino, and Fred Patten, big fan artist. Kate Worley and Kate Worley of Omaha. And Jeff Swycaffer, author of many books featuring Merlino.
Yay!
Okay, and one of the first people accepted for this panel, there's no room for her up here, but Roz Gibson is down in the audience, and her first professional comic, 357, has just come out. It's at the MU press table. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's worth it. Okay, Mark, I think. Yeah. Promo. Speaking of promos, we should mention ConFurence while we're here.
The major reason that I'm on this panel today is because myself and my roommate Rodney Stansfield sponsor ConFurence, which is the first anthropomorphic convention for artists, writers, and fans. And it was formed after there was a lot of development of the more serious type of funny animal, which sort of got the tag name furry because of the furry parties we've been putting on since 1986. One of the first ones was at Comicon. So if your people are into this, you should come to ConFurence. Another plug.
There are flyers for a conference. Okay, well, usually when we introduce everything, we start at one end of the table or the other one. This time, let's do it sort of in chronological order. Omaha was one of the first to start, so why don't we hear about Omaha first and how that got started. So,
Going to hear the answer.
Okay. No explanation of genuine or facetious or spurious about how Omaha got started would be complete without a little sketching in of something even more arcane, which is Voodie, the funny animal Appa, the original, founded by me and Ken Fletcher, the kingpins of the Funny Animal Liberation Front in Minneapolis. It was our feeling at the time that a few ducks here and there were not sufficient to balance the vast tide of guys in spandex that we were up against. This was the disco, what's happening 70s, and we felt that comics were entirely too cool. They were entirely too where it's at, and they were entirely too serious. So we started the Funny Animal Liberation Front for the advancement and the promotion of funny animals in the comics and the exploration of the possibilities of funny animals. Some of which had been explored by people like Tom, but not necessarily followed up on, and certainly not funny animals weren't visible in the middle 70s even as a subgenre. So we started the APA and got more and more people involved. Some of the members of Voodie are now members of the long-standing of Rob Brazzle, which started as a spin-off after Voodie bit the dust in 1983, I think it was. But anyway, in the course of doing Voodie, somebody it was Terrell sent in a postcard saying something about how there wasn't enough sex in funny animal comics. And I've never really been sensible about resisting dares. So I did a few stories for Foodie, and they took care of our surplus membership. And once the dust settled and all the rocks had been thrown, and the membership settled down to something stable, then I started in with Omaha. I was running chapters of this serial about this funny animal stripper. I'd been living in St. Paul at the time and running through sketchbooks, sitting in strip bars and drawing strippers, and there was a local crackdown in the St. Paul, Minnesota community about the ethicality of serving liquor in places where ladies took their clothes off. And I incorporated this into a satirical strip. I was sort of making fun of local politics and so forth. But once it got rolling, the satire just kind of dropped out of it because the characters just kind of took over the story. And eventually it turned into a comic book.
Merchandising phenomenon.
And the rest
Yes.
is bankable.
Okay, Jim, I guess you would be next in chronological order. You started Rap Express and Equine around 84, 85?
84. We started out, I was a syndicated cartoonist for 3 years, running a small strip called Mudflat in Arizona, California, Nevada, and parts of Utah. It was a funny animal strip. Basically, it was going pretty good. It wasn't major, like say Peanuts or anything else. It was only carried by about 90 papers. But what happened was, as I was running, I got sick and tired of the editors in Berkeley, California, and Salt Lake City, and a few other places. They go, well, we don't like the gags you do because of the fact that they're funny animals doing human things, and we don't think it's necessary. And I had one gag, which people thought was funny, but the Berkeley guy, I still can't, to this day, I don't know why he did this. I had to be a little political for once. I had a gag, one strip gag of a guy being recruited by the Marine Corps. And he was all signing the paperwork, he was all happy to go, and yeah, I want to go in the Marine Corps, I want to go in the Marine Corps. And the sergeant goes, by the way, can you speak Spanish? And he goes, sí, señor, escribo y no, I speak read write Spanish. It was all in Spanish. Sergeant was, hey, Lieutenant, we got a Marine for El Salvador. And the Marine was going, damn, I want to Guam. But the thing is, the Berkeley editor swapped it from El Salvador to Nicaragua, and he had to say, damn, I wanted El Salvador. And I cannot understand why he did that. Because of that, man, I immediately quit syndicated cartooning, and I kind of regret that ever since. And I went for about a 3-year lapse of not drawing anything. I said, hell with the world. The world's going to die. But when I met co-creator Richard Conkle at a party, I had told him I'd be the dragons or horses. And he did a character of this, one of my totem of a barbarian horse, much like a parody of Conan. And I said, this has got marketing capability here. And we bounced the idea around for about a little while. I said, let's try syndication. And I go, I don't think we can get it in syndication. Especially when the odds of a syndication are you have 1 in 5,000 chance of you getting past the editor. And so we said, let's do a comic book. This is back when Dave Sim was just starting to come out. And then there was also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles just starting to come out. We said, let's do it. We got the money together and we started doing comic. Thus, Equine and Civilized was born in 85. And I made 2 mistakes of not going into reprints immediately during the glut of 85, and also at the same time, too, I had 13 months delay between number 1 and number 2, because we didn't think we were going to do a second comic. But it's then, we went from there, and now it's like heroin. Just gotta get more. Gotta do comics, it's going to bankrupt me. Who gives a damn? But it's a thing we've done. And I've had several people, why didn't you join Crisis? Because the fact is nobody ever did them. And now I'm used to there's a sudden interest in the equine anthropomorphics. And it's I won't people say, why you can't draw superheroes? Why don't you draw superheroes? I like to nuke every superhero in the big city. Nuke the Smurfs. Thank you. That lovely explosion in the background. But it's right. Thank you. But
Okay. Yeah, Mike, I guess you were next. Well, yeah, okay, go ahead.
What exactly was I supposed to tell everybody?
Oh, well, you're supposed to tell a little bit about Captain Jack, why you started it, why you were doing Captain Jack with anthropomorphic characters, different type characters.
Well, it goes back to Detroit, where
Doesn't it always?
where I lived there, everybody was still, we had communist bookstores and everybody was activists and all this. And, and you were just farting around if you weren't doing some deep meaning, social consciousness raising comics, right? Which I tried to do for years, and I always ended up banging my head against the wall. Once in a while I'd do something funny. I always liked them because I was always interested in animation, and I, learned to, drawing Bugs Bunny, programming, among other things. So I always liked those kinds of. I never put them in comic strips. And I was making all this junk for these little training things for General Motors with these goofy-looking human characters, And so one time I just got really depressed, and I did a story about the world's most depressed superhero, thinking about Jack Holt as a Plastic Man as a dog, only it wasn't Plastic Man, it was the world's Plastic Man has fun. And my character wasn't having fun, he was just completely depressed. And that was about the most depressed I remember being, but the character in it ended up evolving into Adam. But it worked like this. He was such a depressed character that you needed somebody else to offset it. So, I saw the Sergeant Bilko character and talk him into doing all these things he would never do if he was left to his devices. So that's where Jack came in. He wasn't a captain yet. I just screwed around with it for months and months and months and months and just put it away for a while. But then one day I just woke up, literally just woke up with the idea of Herman and Bob, and within hours I had the beatniks from Space Story all inked in. So I was after that in summer of '85. Which is about the time they came out to California, and before I left, I'd sent a bunch of Xeroxes off to a lot of publishers, including Fantagraphics, so I didn't think would be interested in it, because they really didn't do comic books at the time. So I came out to the convention, I drove out in my Chevy, an old rusty Chevy I drove out. And I took it around, and nobody seemed to be interested in it. And I remembered I sent one to Fantagraphics, and I called them, "Hi, did you get it? Did you look at it?" He said, "No, we didn't look at it yet. We'll look at it and we'll call you." So I go, a week later I call him up, and I said, "Did you read it?" He said, "Yeah, can we print it?" I said, "Well, if you want to." That was that. So I didn't know how I did it. Like I said, I was stupid then. I didn't know I couldn't do this. I was working 8 hours a day at Filmation, and then, I got ahead of myself on a bi-monthly schedule, and I wasn't in very good health either. I used to, instead of taking lunch, crawl under the desk and go to sleep for an hour, you know. So I didn't know. I was so dumb. I didn't know it was impossible. See, now that I know better, I can hardly get any books out. So.
Stupid again.
Yeah.
They never show their portfolios and go through, you know, all the formal things. We just fall into it all in dumb black.
Yeah. Jeff, you've got furry character.
Well, okay, you see the guy in the back with the cap and the Omaha shirt doing the filming. It's your fault, Rodney!
And I love
We were at
it.
a picnic and he had a kid's sample portfolio and he sort of flipped it over and said, "What you think of this?" And I knocked him down and sat on him and read it all. It was great. And I wouldn't let him go until I'd read it all at least twice. It was wonderful stuff. And I thought, wow, this is great. So somewhere in there I came up with the concept of a furry character that is somewhat like the Asimov robots. It has to obey orders. You go up to it and you say, "Hey, you, fix that." Okay. And what's the big deal? The point is, of course, with the Asimov robots, there's no internal conflict. It doesn't have any subliminal resentment of obeying orders. You go up to a person, no matter how obedient they are, and say, "You, fix that." And they'll say, "Oh, okay." But with the robot, there's no resentment at all. It's "You, fix that." Yes. That is, you need to say yes. But with the furry character, you've got somewhere right in between where it's genetically programmed, genetically engineered, that it's an obedience machine. But where is still the animal nature of resisting? Because every animal has some form of need for the dominance competition. And so I thought that fuzzy animals, are an ideal way of expressing the subtle things that you want in people that you can't get as people. People are too complex. You can take one concept and simplify it. You've got the cowardly critter or the angry critter. And as long as you're taking characters who are caricatures, and you've got the Wolverine superhero who's angry. Well, why not just make him a wolf? Why go through the middle step? It's also a lot easier to draw that way. I do want to say I don't want to get into superhero bashing. I like superhero comics. They're very good. They're a lot of fun. And one of the important things is there was an Amazing Heroes special a couple of years ago on fuzzy animals, and something like 90% of the artists, when asked, "Why do you draw fuzzy animals?" said, "Well, they're easier to draw than human faces." That also explains the superhero spandex. It's a lot easier to draw that S on the chest than the face the same. You look at Bruce Wayne. You wouldn't recognize him from any two artists. He's not the same man. It's like when they switched the two actors who played Darren Stevens in Bewitched. Come on, you're not fooling me. That's a different guy. It's very hard to draw the same human face twice, but it's easier. It's not easy, but it's easier to draw the same dog or cat or wolf face twice. And so for the artists like me, who are, I'm a writer, it's easier. And that's what 90% of them said in Amazing Heroes.
Okay, well, for a general question to discuss among us, where do we think funny animal comics and furry comics are going, if anywhere? Yeah.
They're the new age. They're the next wave, I think. I think we've run out.
Crash.
We've run out of. Yeah, they will probably will too. Everything else does.
With the exception of the Spider-Man reprints and everything else.
I think one of the things that brought funny animals into something more serious was the fact that we deal much more with relationships and with sexual situations. Whether or not there's actually sex in the comic, there's a lot of titillation and there's a lot of sexual tension in for example, Red Shetland, because she's got this curse on her. There's the plug. Off the press, Mike took a story that was a very slapstick Sergeant Bilbo type story and suddenly developed this very intense relationship, which I think most of us love, but I don't know if the rest of the comic world understood why it suddenly changed, why it suddenly turned. And he was very frank and honest about love and sex and things. And suddenly Captain Jack was a more serious adult comic than he started out being. One of the reasons that we look at animal characters, I think, is we think that we're probably the most sexually hung up things on the planet, and animals don't seem to be. We go to the zoo, and if the animals are in the mood, they do it right in front of us. And we figure maybe something halfway between an animal and a human would be less hung up.
You know, sometimes at the zoo, I think they know we're neurotic and they're just doing that.
Just to make sense.
Watch us freak this one out.
Yeah, you've got a really good point. One of the great Omaha anecdotes. But that's a point that I was just thinking of when you were saying about why we deal with relationships is perhaps because with funny animals, we've always maintained that by doing funny animals, you get past people's barriers. That you bring back childhood things of soft fur, and people forget to be as inhibited or as uptight about what they're reading or what they're thinking. But one time, one of the thousands of times when Omaha got busted going over the border into Canada, it was seized by customs and sent to the magistrate for review. And this time, it got released because the magistrate who reviewed it on this particular trip decided that Omaha was all right because it was animals performing animal acts. As Dennis said about it at the time, we won one, I think. That because this guy managed to blindside it from the other way, which I thought was fascinating, and maybe we should have started using that to get past all the endless trouble that we have had since.
We talked subsequently, I think, about the ironic problem of Dennis not being able to get melody into Canada. And we suggested that maybe we could just work up a bunny ear rubber stamp. And open up the books and stamp bunny ears on all the characters, and we could get through on that same technicality. Okay.
I lose track.
But we tried each of these and couldn't seem to get it to work. But this is... Well, maybe it's the whole thing. Maybe it's the whole thing. Doesn't make me sort of...
Well, the thing is, there was a big controversy that had involving Captain Jack in 2009 and also Omaha that with Friendly Franks too. That didn't help it. Well, because somebody got upset.
My little girl saw this and they got animals performing sex. That's hideous.
Oh no, that case was much worse than that. It wasn't even at that level. The thing that fascinates me is the books that deal, especially with explicit sex and funny animals, get in more trouble. In fact, in New Zealand right now, where we're in trouble again, our book is going to be reviewed in a case coming up in a few months, and they're particularly sensitive there. And this fascinates me, is that the material that is deemed to be unacceptable to children, say, under the age of 15, in a picture story type book, is how the law reads, is deemed to be unacceptable for anyone. Period. And the presumption still going on is that funny animals are for children, whereas, as has been pointed out here, actually probably funny animals deal with more mature subject matter, not merely explicit sex, explicit violence, but with actual relationships. Frankly, I find the humor in funny animal comic books the most sophisticated in the entire business. I think they're the most adult books being done in the industry, not just with quote adult material. Yeah. And but so my personal decision is that I would suggest to those of you who are concerned in bucking community standards in your areas is when this comes up about funny animals being for children, that I think we should start a campaign against adult clothing. I don't think they should be allowed to manufacture and sell adult clothing. It is not suitable for children. And let's face it, it's the same sort of logic. The English language and the drawn line have any inherent character at all is complete nonsense. And I think to stretch it further is that funny animals are a particular thing or have a particular role is equally nonsense. Even some are even suitable for children, and I think that's great too. I don't think there's enough good funny animals being done for kids.
I agree, because I agree that no kid should wear a $350 Pierre Cardin shirt.
No adult.
Yeah, no, that's the most obscene thing I've ever seen.
Well, no, it's the same kind of categorizing that's kept the comics stagnant for so long.
Well, I'll do a little bit of categorizing. I've got a friend who won't read funny animal comics unless it's specific that they have a specific difference from humans. So you've got it's a human wearing a mask, or it's a human wearing a fur suit. And I do have trouble with that. There do seem to be definitely the two. I haven't seen a lot in Omaha that couldn't be done with naturalistically depicted humans. It would be about the same story with real people doing real people things, as opposed to a few ones, Rudipert, Prince of Fur, which is put out by Mew Press.
yeah.
It has to be animals. It doesn't work any other way. And
Well, I think we have to make the distinction between funny animals, which are really humans in clever plastic disguises, and anthropomorphics, which is a scientific basis. And I think that distinction ought to be made clear. And I think you're right.
They're both good. I personally prefer them both. I like them both a lot. I think Omaha. I prefer. Heck, I like both better. I like them both better. Anybody can have one monomania. I've got 9 or 10 of them. but there is a difference, and you've got to. I do actually prefer when the animals have an animal purpose. They're all great.
We had a question?
Yeah, what might be a pretty good, parallel would be the fact that underground comics proved that the written and drawn page can also be something different from superheroes, just as funny animals are now showing that they can be something other than something cute and fluffy dancing across a belt.
Well, underground comics, underground comics proved that. Independent comics proved that, and unfortunately, neither one of them sell that well.
Well, underground comics only recapitulated that. I mean, funny animals, well, Disney notwithstanding, funny animals always were adult materials. I mean, the first time anybody ever saw Betty Boop on the screen, she had puppy dog ears and little bare tits.
And I remember some of the, my first comic book hero when I was about 5 or 6 years old was Sheldon Mayer's Hamster the Hamster, because he could talk anybody into anything, and of course any kid loves that. He was essentially W.C. Fields. And a lot of the early funny animal stories were some comic book writer artist taking one of the popular comedy stars, or a popular comedy star team at the time, and doing them as funny animals. You had Abbott and Costello as funny animals. You had Fox and Crow. You had Danny Kaye as funny animal. A lot of it, practically the entire issue of a funny animal comic could be turned into a routine and sold to these movie stars or radio stars or whatever.
Well, most of the funny animal stories that I remember, from Golden Age and stuff like that were comedy team stories, and they were straight comedy team routines. There was a little smart-ass guy with the cigar stub, and I mean, well, they were all like Fox and Crow, and then there was the big sap that you could talk into anything, and they were basically, about 90% of them were that.
The same theme is in Woody Woodpecker and the recent, about a year ago, the Screwy Squirrel re-release. Those were very nice.
Well, that's the problem. Is a lot of this comics are for children, or funny animals are for children, is actually revisionism. It's people trying to go back to a more innocent time that never existed. And you see a lot of it actually in culture in everywhere these days. The world is making people feel so insecure that they want to make the world safe the way it used to be.
But it wasn't.
That it wasn't. I mean, I was there.
Return to traditional values.
Yeah.
Right. Roz?
That's not entirely fair. They are our traditional values. They are our traditional values. The trouble is, we observe them far more in the breach. It's an ideal. And there's nothing wrong with these traditional values. The close-knit family and the decent values, those are fine. We all really do give a lot of service to those, and we depend on those. We just can't live up to them. And we can't all be Clark Kent.
Well, the definition of what a traditional close family is, I think, is what is, a picture is being presented that really never existed as a tiny minority, and I think the same is true of comics.
One of the things about funny animals that I look at the past, looking forward, is what CBS is doing to Bugs Bunny.
Oh, it's ABC this year.
ABC, but in the past, in the
It's been
past
on all
with
three.
with the Bugs Bunny show is, if you had Bugs opening fire on Elmer with a shotgun, for the last few years, CBS has been, Bugs picks up shotgun, but Elmer now has black face. The entire scene of him firing that shotgun is gone.
No, big action for children's television for that.
Oh, you know, so, no, don't, you know, ACT isn't the really bad guys in this story. See, I tell you, see, I worked on plenty of network shows, and they're not the hard ones. The hard ones are usually either right within the studio, you know, the studio executives, or they're the network executives, or, you know, broadcast standards and practices. ACT has got nothing to do with the content of the show. They can comment on it when it comes out, but they have zero input. So don't go blaming ACT for, you know, what is Andy Hayward's problem, or Jenny Trias or any of the network heads.
Well, they had a thing a few months back in 2000 on a radio talk show, where they had actually showed there was television on condemning almost every single Saturday morning cartoon out there.
Well, they all stink.
No, they were condemning them because of the fact they were too violent, too sexually oriented, too this, too that. They were doing nothing.
I just want somebody to come up with a rating. I'd approve of ratings if somebody would come up with one that just, you know, a label that just said NG. No good.
Now, I know that ACT did have some favorable comments to make about Mighty Mouse, The New Adventure. Okay. Yeah. Well, the reason that they were pointing it out with praise was that it had originality and a bit of imagination.
Yeah, they were funny. There was that too.
Yeah.
You know, I was
Well, somebody
working
thought it was subversive,
Delightfully
so
sick.
it must have been funny.
Just a minute.
One of the main reasons for the cutting of the scenes of any sort of direct act of violence, it's not from within the studio directly, it's from the law firms that are hired by the studio, who then have to fight a suit from parents who are suing the studio for $2.5 million because their one son took daddy's shotgun and blew away their other son.
Well, what the hell is a loaded shotgun doing around around the kids? That's my question.
How can you prove it? That happens all the time.
You know, see, what you don't understand is that the studios and the networks don't wait to be told. You see, they don't worry about a letter they got. They worry about the letters that they're gonna get.
They're trying to second guess.
Yeah, they try to anticipate any problems like that. It's never what they actually get comments on. It's what they think they're going to get comments on. So,
And, oh, I'm sorry. ACT is not paying any attention either. I mean, they made the comment that Gummy Bears was a terrible show because it was just to promote this candy. And anyone would know it has nothing to do with that at all, okay? They never even watched the show.
no, it's just another crummy show with, you know, lots of flailing and lots of ugly character designs and lots of loud colors, and that's it.
Okay. Brian.
Well, there's nothing to consider is the possible backlash to this. There's been a lot of cases where, well, everyone says that these sort of things are a harmless outlet for people's excessive frustrations and all that. And basically, they're right about this. They've got, for instance, probably 98% of people who know this, but it still bears repeating, Japanese television and comics. Take a look at that every day. You see people getting raped, butchered, murdered, chopped, slashed to ribbons. And this is some of the 3-year-old books.
But Brian, you forget one thing. They use robot planes and robot soldiers and all that.
No, we're talking about engineering.
That's the ones that make it here.
The ones that make it here.
And if they're not robots, they say they're robots.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me is,
I'm glad they evacuated that city in time and there's a big mushroom.
yeah, it's just astonishing because, I mean, I grew up, and probably, I'd assume everyone in this room grew up watching all the Warner, watching all the Warner cartoons, and I don't know a single axe murderer in my acquaintance. And we all grew up watching these cartoons, and none of them turned out to be degenerates. We even pay our taxes sometimes.
Okay, Kay first.
Well, one of the problems with television, or at least Netflix doesn't love it, is they have been losing their audience in growth because people have alternatives these days. Cable, VCRs, computers. I haven't watched very much television because of my PBS. However, they are not quite sure why, and they're absolutely terrified of anything that might chase away whatever audience they have left, and they don't know what's keeping them. So anything that strikes them as the least bit pure, the least bit scary, or frightens their audience, they will avoid, because it's a whole mess of people. They're playing CYA as fast and furious as they can.
Crazy, they should be going out like the independent comic books and doing everything that's scattershot effect. Try all the new things.
Yeah, but commercial television's about making money. You keep forgetting that.
If you don't explore for it, you won't be able to drill for it later.
Yeah, okay, Kirk next.
Well, she mentioned what I was going to say. Now there's cable TV. I've been watching the uncut cartoons on TV.
Well, they're not all uncut.
Everybody who can.
On Nickelodeon, they edit them.
The censorship on the networks is almost totally ineffective.
Okay.
Well, we also got to remember, though, unfortunately, TV is the Casper milquetoast of entertainment. It is terrified about everything. In the 50s, if you had a cigar company sponsoring the show, no one smoked a cigarette in the whole show.
Yeah.
You have one cigar, but cigar stubs are ugly. So you have one cigar wrapper, so you don't offend, and it has to be the company's brand.
Well, that was before when the sponsors produced the show. There was a big change in TV.
Not much if they're so terrified about offending somebody. TV execs are terrified of offending somebody. Look at the classic case of Spock. We're going to lose everybody in the South because he's got devil ears. The South loved him.
Yeah.
Because he's got devil
Now,
ears.
the point I make why the problem got worse since the days when the sponsors produced the show, aside from the fact that they only had 2 commercials in a half hour, was see, what that meant was you could go to any manufacturer to try to interest in a show, but now there's 3 networks you can go to, and 3 people. 4 if you count Fox. And Fox, well, they're trying desperately to cultivate the image of being the free, loose, wacky, free-thinking network, or as bull-headed and pig-ignorant as the other 3. No, they're not. They're the biggest fuckheads I've ever seen. I mean, they're as bad as any of the other networks. They are not trying. They're as dumb as anybody. They're trying to cultivate the image that you're perceiving, but they don't. But they're as cautious and idiotic as the rest of them.
Yeah,
And the Tiny Toons, you've got a reverse case. Whereas you say you have one group looking at the Warner cartoon, the only person that understands them is somebody that watches them and laugh at them. But the network will look at them and say they're violent. But at Tiny Toons, you had the opposite. And the same thing that gave us Roger Rabbit, where you had people that liked them.
Yeah.
But they couldn't understand what made them funny. They thought they were funny because people were getting hit on the head. It wasn't funny because there was some adult humor there. So, the Tiny Toons philosophy was, hit as many people on the head as you can in 6 minutes, because they thought that was what made them funny. And it's somebody simply getting hit on the head isn't funny by itself. It's a setup that makes it funny. So you got people going off the deep end in the other direction. Now that's syndicated so they can get away with clobbering people.
Well, I'm missing the point then. Are you saying that Roger Rabbit isn't funny? I think it's magnificent. I think those are the best cartoons made ever so long. They're great.
Okay, Brian?
To quickly switch back to what I was saying before, basically there's another thing that shows up a lot in societies that we look at where we find artistic or more or less individualist, what's the term, repression, that we find more cases of violence coming up. And America's supposedly land of the free and home of the brave, well, people slowly going crazy because they have to deal with the fact You're taking a set level of what it's supposed to be, that the government tells you you're supposed to be, and trying to conform to that, and resisting every instinct that is screaming out the complete genetic makeup.
Not the
You
genetic.
love watching something getting clunked on the head, right?
If it was genetic, it wouldn't be the same in other countries. The problem with America is simply we were all built around a frontier, and we don't have a frontier anymore, so we're going quietly crazy.
What I mean is you see cases like this appearing in other countries, like
Oh yeah, it's real simple. There's no world war going on, and I have a theory about this. I have a theory. I'll let you all in on this. You heard it here first. My theory is since we are part of the animal kingdom, is the human species is suffering from the kind of behavior you'll get within any species when you have too many surplus males. Too many young males and insufficient territory, and we don't have a war to kill them all off, so they're just starting to do it at random
America
now.
hasn't had a war for 20 years.
And people don't think I'm subversive.
Okay, we've sort of segued off the section. Off the sexual aspect of the violence, which is still adult type material.
No, well, that's the thing that makes me the angriest about the whole adult comics controversy is I think settling things with violence is the least adult behavior you can possibly display. And I deeply resent having my cute little sex book labeled the same as all of these evisceration masterpieces that are coming out now. And having them both called adult.
Have any of them been
Oh,
banned?
definitely.
Have any of the violent ones been banned? I've never heard of any violent comics being banned.
How dare you have fun at a time like this?
The other hand,
Yeah, that's something that's always bothered me. I have 2 children of my own. I'd much rather have see someone without any clothes on than Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 with ripping people apart and all this. I mean, that's much more obscene.
Yeah.
And you're teaching
That's
kids
entertaining.
that's all right. This is okay, but some woman without her top on is wrong.
Well, the sexual repression is going up. Is getting tighter and tighter as the violence level goes up and up. And I just think the hypocrisy of the system at this point is just starting to drive me completely bananas. Because it's getting just worse and worse. There are no limits on violence whatsoever.
yeah, we've returned to the 1950s. Juvenile delinquency is climbing. There's all these comics around. Obviously, get rid of the comics, and there's all the juvenile delinquency around.
What? Mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes. Yeah.
What?
Reefer Madness and Blackboard Jungle for gang violence and crack houses.
No.
Well, what was entertaining for me is like I had the National Organization for Women here of Red Shetland. They liked it because she was a feminist. They didn't like it the fact that she suddenly went from child to adult. They said, idiots, she grew up in a normal pace. That was a dream sequence that was said so in the comic. Well, she looks like she was oppressed. And we also heard that you might have her lose her virginity somewhere down the line, so we're going to boycott your comic. Please, do it, ladies, please. You couldn't help, you couldn't. I said, please, get the Ayatollah to put a death sentence on me. And the thing is, they're going, no, we'll contact your distributors instead.
You are
Just about. But you're going to get people no matter what, at least what I've encountered, you're going to get people that will bitch about anything and everything, whether it's sex, violence, funny animals, superheroes, or detective magazines. They don't care. I've heard people bitch about Dick Tracy because they got Breathless Mahoney as a slut.
Well, I'm mad about it because they paid absolutely no attention to what they took all these characters and wrote their own story for it and paid little attention to it.
Actual
Kept
Chester
cool.
Pool.
But, no, I was going to say, just off on a semi-tangent, a lot of you people read a lot of different things. And, I do too, and I like to draw different things, and some days I just want to draw things like Fox and Crow when I get up in the morning. It depends how I feel that day, And it's, the best philosophy, for whether you're reading or making is just whatever you feel like at that moment, go to it. Instead of, you can intimidate yourself and say, well, I just read this, or I just make something like this, and I wouldn't fuss with this or that. And then you can really make yourself messed up, you know, because you're censoring yourself. Even if, you know, what it is that you think you ought to be doing is like spitting in the face of the censors, and you say, that's what I'm going to do every single day. Well, what if one day...
You run out of spit.
You know,
Exactly.
You know, what if, well, supposing someday, you know, in between, you don't feel like it, you feel like just doing something stupid. And something, you know, a goofy story in the middle of all that, and then you say, well, no, that's beneath me.
Right,
And you
yeah,
don't do
I
it.
hope people don't make the you know, the mistake of assuming because somebody does some adult material, they can't do children's stories. I'm running into that, of course, because now I'm writing all ages comics as well. Is the assumption like I'm locked. You know, I can't write things that are appropriate for anyone under 18. And
No,
it's
it's-
very, you know, it's another ghetto.
It's kind of funny, but I mean, it seems like, you know, like people might, like somebody might be able to make the association that, you know, somebody who likes sex, very possibly may like children as well. And animals.
And animals.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in that exact situation. I'm sort of infamous in small press for doing very adult financial stuff. Yet I make my living doing children's stories for children's television. The brain isn't limited to these narrow categories.
But you give nightmares,
You can do whatever you want.
Karen, you give nightmares to neurotic 7-year-olds in Iceland over laziness and violence over stupid things. Wait, what kid?
Family with the chainsaws.
Yes.
I mean, anyone who's been to studios or who's had friends, people who've been in the business, writers or whatever, animation business, they've all seen that file that they've got, or those pictures that the director asked them to take off the wall that were drawn one late afternoon on Friday when people got crazy, okay? It's just the opposite of what he said. If all you're doing all day long is writing this stuff that is for children, it has to be educational and kind of mellow and everything, you want to sometimes just cut loose and do
You've got
something
to.
really crazy.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, no, it's because you hate the characters.
Not necessarily.
And so, no, a lot of the times that's why, so you do mean things to them, like in Filmation, they're doing that constantly. You know, we had a big stack of drawings of you know, one of the shows we were working on that was cancer, that before it got on, there was the wooden bug out of the Pinocchio movie, and I had a big file of drawings of just doing mean things to that character, and they were mean things you would do to